Hey, Nathan Daniel here, and welcome to the premiere of I Survived, the once weekly video show focused on positivity and perseverance. Each week, we are going to dive into a true survival story from an everyday person, just like you and me. Now, before we get started, I just want to, again, thank you for watching, and let you know that if you would like to participate and be a part of this weekly program, you can send your true survival story to nathandaniel03@gmail.com. And what we'll do is we will take those stories and anonymously share them right here each week for other people to watch and gain encouragement from. It is my hope that through these videos we can open a discussion and dialogue on topics that have stigma surrounding them, whether it's illness, LGBT issues, bullying, anything that everyday people face, and any challenge that life throws at people that just wears them down. Because the truth of the matter is, sometimes life is hard, and that's okay. We can pull together and we can help each other. So today, I would like to start our series by talking about how I survived hepatitis C. I've talked about this a little bit in the past, but with World Hepatitis Day coming up on July 28th, this Sunday, I am actually launching an awareness campaign for hepatitis C. And so I thought that it would be a great segue into that. And honestly, it is a very big part of who I am and what I've gone through. So I did want to share that with you. My hepatitis C stories are my #1 video on my channel. And that tells me that people are looking for this. And it's not just hepatitis C. People are searching how other people dealt with bullying, or how other people dealt with being kicked out of their home or surviving a bad breakup. And these are all things that I hope that we get a chance to tackle. So if you have a survival story that you think somebody needs to hear, send it to me to nathandaniel03@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. My journey with hepatitis C began when I was very young, around the age of 8 or 9. My mom sat me down and told me that she had been diagnosed with hepatitis C, something that we didn't know much about at the time. She told me that this meant that she had a virus that would attack her liver. And among other things, that meant that she shouldn't drink anymore. She had to change her diet. And eventually, it meant that she would have to start taking medication. Now, this medication consisted of pegylated interferon, a weekly injection, and a daily pill of ribavirin. At the time, there wasn't any information out there. The internet existed, but it wasn't, we didn't use it very well back then still. But my aunt, whom you'll see in part of my awareness campaign launching on Sunday, did a lot of research to learn more about this disease that we had never known about. So we learned the risk factors, we learned how to protect ourselves, but most important, we learned how it was going to affect my mom and what changes we needed to expect. I remember she had to, about the same time, she needed a new place to live, and my aunt and uncle were actually looking for a place as well. They knew that my mom was starting this treatment and she was probably going to need some help. So the three of them decided to get a place together so that people would be there to help her. It was a really nice ranch-style home out in the middle of nowhere. And it's during that time that I remember her going through the biggest change, both emotionally and physically. My aunt and uncle both worked quite a bit, so they weren't around, I think, as much as they would have liked, or at least while I was there, they wasn't. I visited every other weekend. And I remember there were days where she couldn't get out of bed. She would just lay there and just weak and tired. She would sleep. And she would sleep so hard that me at 9 years old, I would go in and I would feel under her nose. I was afraid that she wasn't breathing anymore. And it took a toll on her personality as well during that time. The medication did. I know that she didn't eat as much, and she was very stressed out and probably a little depressed. She had gotten me a soap making kit where you melt the soap down and pour it into molds. And I really wanted to use it, and she was on the phone, and I was hounding her to play with this thing that she had just got me. And she finally snapped a little bit, and she told me that was her plan all day long. She just needed to get a couple things done because she just didn't have the strength or the motivation to do it any other day, and she must have been having a good day. And I felt bad because, I mean, a 9-year-old feeling bad about it. But I had known that she had this struggle and this hardship that she was going through, and I felt bad pushing her to that point. But we had a very fun time making these soaps. They were shaped like fish. And we put a mug in the microwave, and we put it in too long and it shattered. So we threw the evidence in a plastic bag, and she didn't want anybody to see it in the garbage, so she threw it under her bed. Months later, when we went to move, we found the bag again, and she looked around, and she threw it in an old box, and we took it with us when we moved. My mom went into remission after that treatment. And it ended up coming back. After she passed away for something else, not from hepatitis C, my aunt, the one who had done all the research, had found out and been diagnosed with it as well. That was probably within a year of my mom's passing. I was 12. And at that time, she encouraged everybody in the family. She says, well, if I have it, you all should get tested as well. So that is when I was diagnosed, and one other member of my family was diagnosed. I don't say who it was because I didn't get permission to talk about it. So I ended up, and all three of us ended up going on the same treatment that my mother had gone through. And I remember that first night, my dad had to give me a shot. We had a nurse come in and teach us how to do it. So she walked him through it that first time. And I was up all night, sweating and throwing up. I think at one point I probably begged to die. It was not exaggerating. It was the worst kind of sickness I've ever experienced to this day. I think the in-home nurse came one other time. Funny story, not to get too sidetracked, but the first time she came, we knew she was coming, and we had thrown eggs on the stove to boil. We were making hard-boiled eggs. And then we went out into the barn to do work, and we forgot about them. So this poor woman, we remembered shortly before she got there, like maybe 20 minutes. But this one woman came into our house, and it just smelled terrible because of those eggs. She laughed it off. She was a really sweet woman. But she came one other time, I think, to watch my dad do the injection. We had to do them once a week. The second injection didn't bother me bad, but I had to get blood work every single week. While I was on it, it wasn't approved for children under the age of 18. I think my dad probably signed a consent form because there was no other option. And about a month in, did blood work. We were doing the shots, and after that first night, the shots didn't affect me as bad. I still struggle with my appetite, but it took away my appetite. I could hardly ever eat. But other than that, I didn't get the same effects that a lot of people get from it. Other than that first night, and I couldn't eat while I was on the treatment very much at all. But I ended up getting blood work after about a month, and a few days later, my doctor called the house, and I answered, and she says, "Is your dad there?" And I told her no, and she asked for a cell phone number. I wouldn't give it out, so I told her that I'd have him call her. And I called him, and I told him. And then she called back, and she says, "Is your dad there?" And I said, "No," and she insisted that she needed his cell phone number, and I hung up on her. I called my dad. So my dad got home from work, and he called the doctor, and she said that we had to go to the hospital, the Women's Children's Hospital, so it was about 2 hours away. He says, "Well, that's bullcrap. Why can't I just take him to our local hospital?" She says, "No, you don't understand. This is life or death." So he packed up some clothes for me or whatever, and we went out to the hospital. We got there, and they told us that my platelet count had dropped down to like 900 parts per million. I think it's supposed to be at 11,000 or something like that. And at that point, you're at risk of internal bleeding because your blood's so thin. So I spent a week in the hospital. They took me off the treatment, and I went through a blood transfusion. They gave me blood platelets, and still I didn't have an appetite. I hardly ate while I was there. But my dad told me, he said, "If you wanna go home, you better eat. They're not gonna let you go home if you don't eat." So I choked down as much as I could, and I actually think he might have ate some of my food for me so that they would let me go. And at that point, there were no other treatment options. That was the only treatment available. And now when I say treatment, it's a real treatment, not a cure. People didn't get cured from this treatment that they had. They could only be put in remission, similar to a cancer, so it could always come back. So we ended it knowing that I wasn't put in remission. It was still active, but there was nothing that we could do. Now, a lot of people with hepatitis C who have the courage to tell people go through something similar. But when when my friends found out, actually my friend's parents found out, one of them I didn't know this until literally a couple months ago. She sat all of my friends down and told them that because I have this virus, this disease, that I would not be alive for graduation, that I was going to die. And this is the type of misinformation that existed back then, and I'm sure still today. You'll see on Sunday when I post this awareness campaign, my aunt and my mom went through the same things, where they told their friends, they tried to talk about it, try to educate people, and they would get shut out. They would stop hearing from their friends. They wouldn't come around anymore, because they didn't understand and they were scared. Anyhow, fast forward from 12 to 23, I started to hear about this new cure, this miracle pill called Harvoni. And I did a little research, I looked it up, and right away I realized I couldn't afford that. It was $90,000. And so I brushed it off. And then through my work situation, I ended up on Medicaid through New York State Health Exchange. And I figured my insurance before wouldn't cover it, but maybe this would. So I went to a gastroenterologist, the same one that my mom had used and my aunt had used through their first treatment type, the pegylated interferon. And we applied for treatment rather than Harvoni, we went with a newer generic drug called Zepatier. Now instead of 90,000, it was 50,000. Before I could get approval, they had to check to see what sort of damage was done on my liver from the disease. And what's amazing is in 10 years, I went from the first time I had to have a liver biopsy to check liver damage. So they put me under, and they went in between my ribs and took a core sample of my liver. They actually asked permission to take a little bit more because I was so young and use it for research purposes. And it was a biopsy. They took a core sample, so it took a few days to recover, probably a full week. I was little. But now 10 years later, to check liver damage, all they had to do was blood work. They took some of my blood and they were able to tell. So it's amazing what can happen in 10 years. Now, the insurance company denied my treatment when we applied. And I think it was in part because the amount of liver damage I didn't have any. Honestly, that's how this virus works. You can have it for years and years and years, never have any side effects, never have any damage, and then it'll flare up and it'll start attacking your body. You'll get that jaundice, you'll get the depression, the loss of appetite, and until you get it treated, it just beats you down. But anyhow, I went back and we reapplied. We appealed the decision, and in New York State, if you're denied treatment, you can actually appeal right to the state, one of the state agencies. And so that's what my doctor did. And it took about a month and a half, I think, and we were approved. So I began my treatment on Memorial Day weekend, the same weekend that we do a family vacation. And it's very important when you're taking this medication that you don't drink. So I got to be the DD. This new treatment, Zepatier, and Harvoni, there's a few other ones now to treat different genotypes, but they are all once daily pills rather than the daily pill with a weekly injection. So it was very easy. There's some light side effects. The most I ever got were some slight headaches, and they weren't any more for me than the headaches that I get when I don't drink water. So I would just make sure that I stayed hydrated and the best I could. It took 12 weeks of treatment. I did blood work every other week for the first month, and then I didn't do blood work again until the very end. The very first round of blood work I did, a week after treatment started, my viral load was down to 0. There was no evidence of the virus in my system. It had already put me in remission. The way these drugs work, my understanding, is the hepatitis C virus is a cell, and the medication takes it and covers it up. That way it can't reproduce. It can't split itself up. And so, of course, in order to live and survive, it has to be able to replicate. So the medication stops it from replicating, and it took a week for all of the current cells to die. And so at the end of my 12-week treatment, we did blood work, and then we had to do blood work a month later to make sure that it didn't come back. If there's no viral load at that point, they consider you cured. Through their testing, they say that it will never come back unless you're reinfected. So you still have to avoid those risk factors. But my hepatitis C, my family's hepatitis C, had an emotional impact on all of us. It made me sacrifice some very major opportunities. People treated me a little different, and it ended a career opportunity that I had with the United States military. Anyhow, after getting treatment, my aunt actually went through the same new treatment. She went with Harvoni, and she was able to be cured as well. So that was my battle with hepatitis C, which I survived. I encourage everybody here who's watching to make sure that they go watch the videos in my awareness campaign coming up this Sunday, July 28th, for World Hepatitis Day. We are going to be covering the myths surrounding hepatitis C. risk factors and preventative care. We're going to be covering diagnosis and treatment in depth, and we're also going to talk a little bit more, just like this, about our journey and our struggle and the effects, the personal toll that it took on our lives. It's through this campaign that I hope you all share and begin a discussion. Please, please, please don't be afraid to click share and post those videos. If you never share one of my videos, again, please share the videos in this series coming up on Sunday. We are still seeing a rise in hepatitis C cases, even though we have a cure now, because so many people who have hepatitis C do not know it. There are many different risk factors that people don't realize, and we're going to be covering all of them. So please take time to watch them when they post on Sunday. Anyhow, I would like to thank you for joining me for the first episode in the I Survived series. We are going to continue to post these every Wednesday at noon. And if you want to get involved, you can send me your survival stories anonymously to nathandaniel03@gmail.com. Let's start a discussion on these topics. Chances are, if you struggled with something in your life, if you ever had a point where you thought, how am I ever going to continue going on? Or how am I going to get through this? Chances are somebody right now is struggling with it too. And hearing your story of how you survived, how you pushed through, could help them. So please consider sharing your story to me so that we can reach as many people as we can. I'd like to thank you for watching. If you want to continue watching this series, click that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up. And you can follow me on social media. I'm at Nathan Daniel on Twitter, at NathanDaniel03 on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere else. And until next time, remember, be loud, be heard, but most importantly, be yourself. See ya.